Hi, my name is Robert Pinckney, and I'm going to talk about my Capstone organization, which is the United States 10th Fleet Cyber Command, and its IT governance framework, and also the improvements that it can make in that framework in order to posture itself for future success. U.S. Fleet Cyber Command, U.S. 10th Fleet is essentially three organizations in one. That first organization of those three that we're going to talk about is the Joint Force Headquarters Cyber, which makes it the U.S. Cybercom's representative, the U.S. Indo-Pacific Command, United States Forces Korea, United States Southern Command. Those three combatant commands, and with U.S. Forces Korea being a sub-unified command, are essentially organizations that utilize Fleet Cyber Command, U.S. 10th Fleet, for command and control over its cyber mission forces for any operation that may happen at that particular theater. So each of the United States military services has a Joint Force Headquarters Cyber that is responsible to combatant commands and sub-unified commands for overseeing their cyber mission forces. So essentially, Navy cyber forces are applied to any particular military operation in those particular theaters based on the organizational structure of the Joint Forces Headquarters Cyber. For U.S. Fleet Cyber Command, it functions as an echelon to U.S. military, particularly a Navy command, that is a cyber component to U.S. Cyber Command, cryptologic component to National Security Agency Central Security Service, a nuclear command and control functional leader to United States Strategic Command, and it's the component command for U.S. Space Command for space. It also is the central operational authority for all of Navy's networks, cryptology, signals intelligence, cyber, and space. Essentially, all of those aforementioned functions under those particular components. And it serves as the Navy authorizing official for its networks, meaning that the accreditation, the inspection, the auditing of all Navy networks, and particularly the approval of what goes on those networks fall under Fleet Cyber Command. U.S. 10th Fleet is essentially the operational arm of Fleet Cyber Command. Same leader, but now they're operational forces that, particularly in the cyber realm, fall under 10th Fleet that executes functions in networks, cryptology, SIGINT, cyberspace ops, and space. It's important to note the command relationships, as we just mentioned. All this slide does is, in a graphical setting, kind of explain all those different things and those functions of Fleet Cyber Command. It lists on the right all those different major fleet forces, U.S. fleet forces, which is also the United States Atlantic Fleet and Pacific Fleet, are major fleets. 10th Fleet is like a numbered fleet, like 2nd, 3rd, or 4th, or 5th Fleet. And you have all these different forces commands, which functions as Navy components to all of the different combatant commands. If you look at the very bottom, you see that operational side, as I mentioned, of under 10th Fleet, 4th Fleet Cyber Command. So you have the same guy who has essentially an operational arm under him as the Fleet Cyber Commander, with Commander Task Force 1010 for Department of Defense Information Operations, which is the commander for Navy Network Warfare Command in Suffolk, Virginia. Commander Task Force 1020 for Defensive Cyber Operations, which is the Navy Cyber Defense Operations Command, which is also in Suffolk, Virginia. They essentially share the same building and the same network operations floor. But those two functions are separate, but they work together in order to ensure that the Navy Cyber Mission Force is postured for those particular two pieces of what Fleet Cyber Command and 10th Fleet does. Then you have different commander task forces and task groups under global and regional operations that support essentially the other functions. So when we're talking about signals intelligence and cryptology, a lot of those functions fall there. The cyber mission forces and cybersecurity pieces are under there as well, but they function a little bit different in that they're not a part of the DoD information operations and the defensive cyber operations that are unique to the Navy's functions under Fleet Cyber Command. Those other task groups and forces essentially are postured upon a national mission. And for Commander Task Force 1090 in research and development, we can look at that as the Navy Cyber Warfare Development Group, where they develop cyber tools to either do all of the different cyber functions that fall under Commander 10th Fleet, Fleet Cyber Command. When we talk about IT governance and the framework that is utilized for Fleet Cyber Command 10th Fleet, it's important to note what the Integrated Navy Operations Command and Control System does and how it plays a part in all of this. This is the framework that defines the integrated functions, processes, and systems needed to effectively operate, secure, and defend the Navy's information assets across the Department of Defense Information Network Navy. Those different operations are three pieces. Now, there's more that 10th Fleet does, but when it comes to IT operations, IT governance, these are the three kind of critical pieces of it. And cybersecurity is an underlying function in that under those two defensive cyber operations pieces. But all those things kind of flow together. So under Department of Defense Information Network Operations, management and maneuver of all network and incorporated assets. So what that means is tailoring and moving and making sure that the infrastructure that's in place is there and ready to effectively make sure that the network can maneuver and incorporate whatever it needs so that the Navy's operational forces have the network available to it for what it needs to do. When it comes to defensive cyber operations and internal defense measures, that is the monitoring, configuration, and maneuver of all internal defense measures. So patching systems, ensuring that you will have the confidentiality, the integrity, and availability of all of your data and information. All those things fall under that. And the efforts that go towards that are pretty important, and they fall under that governance framework. And the defensive cyber operations response actions are the data analysis and forensics to inform and execute response actions. So the response actions to something that is threatening our networks that we have to have a defensive posture for. So that is taking a hard drive and looking at to see what are the tactics, techniques, and procedures that a particular advanced persistent threat may be using against us so we can attribute those actions to that so that we can decide how we're going to respond to it. All of those things are important pieces of that framework and that we need to be able to put those things together because as a military organization, you're going to function and respond like every other organization when it comes to managing a network, but at the same time, you need to be postured in order to incorporate what your operations are with other military operations. And when we talk about that, we talk about what's kinetic, meaning things that actually will probably explode or blow up based on the type of weapons we may use, and non-kinetic, meaning our ability to make something not capable of its mission without utilizing a munition. And those things can happen in cyber. Those things can happen for a lot of different ways. But typically, what we try to do is make sure that all of the military functions that fall under our fall as far as 10th Fleet Cyber Command fit into this framework so that we can execute it with the network. The key piece of all of that is the systems of systems approach, recognizing that every different ship, every different piece of our organization, all the different task forces and task groups, all the different afloat and ashore networks, all are different systems, but they are part of a larger, bigger system that fits up under our enterprise architecture. So that's command and control C2, decision making and data and information environment. So those tools that we utilize for that are there to enable rapid, effective command and control of the Department of Defense Information Network Navy, as well as access and visibility of data to support operational readiness and activities. So knowledge management, making sure that you have everything you need so you can pull the data that you need to in order to effectively execute naval operations. That's a key piece of our governance framework. That's where we have to constantly look for improvement. And as we move forward and talk about the things that the Navy is doing and needs to do in the future, to posture itself to make sure that it can improve upon its governance framework so that it can make sure that it's an effective organization in the future and that we're taking into account all the different things that we need to do right. This is a key piece to that. The management network environment looks at providing a secure and isolated communications path to transport all C2 and operations traffic, administration, maintenance, and provisioning activities. Ideally, this management network operates in a true out-of-band environment. So what we need to understand is that the Navy is unique in that the places that it operates, and largely that is at sea, where there are no cables, there's no Wi-Fi connection, and that a lot of the ability for us to do network operations involves us using satellite communications and other means, that it's important to make sure that that network environment is as secure as possible because we need to be able to move and operate in environments everywhere in the world. And so that is a key piece of what the Navy does. It's a key piece of how it functions, and it's important to make sure that that environment is protected and considered a critical piece of the operational environment in our networks. If we can't provide that, then there's no point of assuming that the people who need the data have the data where they need it. So it's important to look at all of those things and kind of put those things kind of together. And so when we look at fully integrated Department of Defense and Navy operations, you see shore, sea, air, space, and cyber all fit into those pieces. So space is obviously a key future in operating environment for the United States military as a whole, in that we now have a U.S. Space Force. We reinstituted the United States Space Command as a functional combatant command. We already look at cyber as a domain, and the air, sea, and the shore has always been military operational domains since the dawn of mankind. So the ability to have end-to-end oversight across all the domains, across all the enclaves that we have on there is an important piece of our governance framework. And so all those things have to be federated. It cannot be based on a singular particular technological innovation. It has to be maneuverable. It has to be focused on the data, because the data is what gets to the right decisions for us. So whether I have a computer of one particular brand or a computer of another one, or whether my network is being transmitted over fiber optic or optical carrier cable, I need to make sure that the person who needs the data has it where they have to, when they need it, and it has to be, you know, confidential and available with integrity. We need to be able to provision on demand the services that we need. It needs to be dynamic, and we need to be able to come up with alternate routing in order to make sure that it's available to us when we need it, where we need it, and that the bandwidth required or any of the other things that we need to do is available to us to execute those particular services. In a world in which cloud computing is becoming more and more prevalent, and that we're relying on that, in the future where we become to a zero trust architecture, that is going to be a critical piece of what we do. Common integration infrastructure. That's another important piece of our governance, is that everything kind of has to talk and fit together. And so as we move forward as a military service, we need to make sure that we look at those things and that our unified operational approach fits that. A common governance structure. So when you have so many different organizations, the governance structure has to be applicable to all of them, but also be tailorable to each of these individual organizations so that they can take ownership in the metrics that you're going to look at to evaluate how effective their governance is over time. So the measures of effectiveness and the measures of performance are pretty important. They need to be common to some level so that they can be transmitted throughout everybody so we understand. And then we have to make sure that our taxonomy and our lexicon is the same so that everybody can look at that and apply it appropriately. And that's a key piece of everything that we're trying to do with our governance structure. And then we need to be able to take that and then package that and educate our force on how we do those things. So the future is now. So how do we get to where we need to be in order to execute the functions that we need to execute? So the Navy's digital platform transformation, a lot of what we're doing is that we're talking about that. And that is taking the things that we have as a Navy and then modernizing it. The framework for all that is what the INOCCS, as we talked about. Afloat, the next generation networks recompete. It's just essentially recompeting the contract that's now with Hewlett Packard Enterprise for next generation enterprise networks, and then allowing different organizations in the IT commercial world to then compete for that so that we can get the best out of that. And we're looking at changing the way not only is that governed, but also what it provides for us. So the customers are satisfied with the product they're getting, and that we can ensure that our governance structure and what we plan to do in the future as far as our military operations are supported by what that contract can do for us. We're trying to set up a whole lot of different technological advances that takes advantage of what's also proliferating in the IT world commercially, but also that enables us to make sure that we have a more secure and less, I would say, traditional or legacy network. Software-defined networks is a piece of that. A lot of that will require a DevSecOps approach, agile, approach to software development. Those things are important to us, and then as we move forward as a Navy, we need to tailor our IT governance structure towards that. Out of band management network, that is making sure that everything that we can do depends in our transport and our ability to get data to where we need to go can fit in that particular realm. Cloud Smart, our cloud implementation strategy in the Navy is always changing because we're looking at all the different as a service functions that we can implement where and then how we can do that both on premise and off. So as we move forward, we need to look at that and make sure that we understand and we have people educated on the governance structures and how it will change based on what those things are. So if you have infrastructure as a service, then what does that mean for your governance structure and implementation plan? The Navy has to think about that, metrics for how we're going to do that, and how we're going to hold that cloud service provider accountable for what we want to do. And that'll be a key piece as we look at things moving forward. Joint regional security stacks essentially we're moving and drifting away from that, but the Navy looked at that and we incorporated that. And in the meantime, until that completely goes away, we're going to make sure that we're following all the security parameters and policies and procedures put forth from us from the Defense Information Systems Agency on that. And a joint all domain control, command and control, JADC2. This is an important concept that is going to allow networks to talk between services and at some point coalition forces so that we can share data in real time in a combat environment. So each of the services has a different approach to this that's unique to the different platforms they have and how their networks are set up. For the Army, it's Project Convergence. For the Navy, it's Project Overmatch. And for the Air Force, it's the Air Battle Management System, ABMS. So all those things are supposed to work together. Now, there are network cross-functional teams that's overseen by the Joint Staff, J6, and the Department of Defense Deputy Secretary. But the goal of that is to make sure that despite all the things we're trying to do in the network and moving toward the future, that they can all talk to each other and they can all support the same operations and that we are postured to take on our pacing and near-peer threats. The different implementation of those things are going to support the Joint Enterprise Defense Infrastructure. That is essentially a virtual cloud infrastructure that we're trying to have throughout the Department of Defense, sort of the way that the intelligence community does it now. The challenge of that is making sure that the process of picking the right cloud service provider is there, and that the challenges to that is it's all worked through. I won't go into detail about CWIP or the Surface Electronic Warfare Improvement Program because of classification purposes, but to make sure that we have all of the things we need from 10th Fleet from that particular portion of their portfolio and the equipment associated with that. Compile to connect in 24 hours. So we're going to need software factories. We're going to need people with the right coding capability, the people who can make sure that we can iterate, continuously develop software in a way that we can compile, connect software, and then execute it in the right environment. C2, C24 will also involve, things like virtual pilot ships and digital twins. All that technology is going to go into making sure that we can move forward to support all of our, future emerging technologies. Unmanned surface and unmanned underwater vehicles are a key piece of what militarily we're going to go to in the future, and those things are going to require networks. Offensive hypersonic weapons, laser weapons, AI/ML, additive manufacturing, 3D printing, things like that, live virtual and constructive training, and not cryptocurrencies in particular, but I'll say technologies like blockchain is going to support kind of the things we're trying to do. Digital ledgers are an important piece to making sure that you have a lot of different things secure and transactions, and data security is a key piece of what the Navy is trying to make sure that we can constantly do, particularly when it comes to JADC2. And 5G is also a key piece of that, and the spectrum capabilities of that are also going to come into play as the Navy moves forward in the future. So our ability to govern our IT infrastructure is going to have to take into account where we're trying to go with emerging technology, where we are now. Are we educating ourselves? Are we making sure that we have a tailorable governance structure that's applied across our entire enterprise? Are we giving the right metrics to folks so that they can apply them to what they're doing, and that we're using the right common language, taxonomy, so that they can understand exactly what those are, and then making changes and having the authority and the autonomy to kind of make them as they move forward so that we can execute it in the right way. Those are the things that we're doing with 10th Fleet Cyber Command. I hope you enjoyed this talk. Thank you.